Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Emily, I work for Cycling UK, and I'm going to be talking to Karen Darke, who is someone who has done a huge amount of different adventures, including traveling all over the world on her hand cycle. She's a world record holder, she has an MBE and a couple of Olympic medals. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite Karen to join me and we'll have a quick chat, about your journey.
Hi,
Hello,
Emily.
Karen.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good, thank you. I am actually in my bed, which I'm sure you can tell, surrounded by pillows. I have people staying in my house, so I'm hiding in my bedroom to do the webinar. But hi, everybody or anybody that's here. Welcome.
This is just working from home pandemic life, I think. Everyone's trying to make it work however they can, finding a space.
Absolutely.
As you can see, I'm in my spare room, so this is just how it goes. So yeah, I mean, I guess I sort of gave an extremely brief overview of why we've invited you along today, part of our Women's Festival of Cycling series of webinars where we're trying to encourage women to ride bikes, basically, of all sorts. And obviously that's where you come in. So you ride a hand cycle, very fast and very far sometimes. So can you
Sometimes.
can you give us a quick sort of I don't know, an outline of how you got into cycling in the first place, specifically hand cycling, I suppose?
Yeah, so I guess I was always really into adventure of different kinds, but mainly rock climbing and running in the mountains, orienteering, but I did also love cycling. So I used to do quite a bit of cycle touring before I was paralyzed. And then when I was 21, I fell off a cliff in Scotland, broke my back, and so that resulted in me being paralyzed from the chest down. So the third thoracic bone, so pretty much kind of armpit level, really. Below there, I have no movement and no sensation. And at the beginning, when I was in hospital, I started exploring different avenues for different activities that I might be able to do. And this is a long time ago now. It's like more than 25 years since I've been paralyzed. So back then, hand cycling didn't really kind of exist.
So what kind of activities were you doing then, if it wasn't hand cycling?
Yeah, so in the hospital, the main activities on offer were archery, shooting.
Right.
None of them really appealed. I was really lucky because there was a physio at the hospital who was really kind of into the outdoors as well. And she suggested that we could go sailing on a Wednesday afternoon instead of doing archery. So she used to come with me to a nearby lake near the hospital where there was an adapted sailboat. So that kind of whet my appetite again for the outdoors. But there were some hand cycles you could get that clip onto the front of wheelchairs.
Yep.
And you pedal them with your two arms together, but it kind of clips onto your wheelchair. And I found it actually more difficult to use than just pushing my wheelchair. And I think that's from such a high injury. I didn't have like the core muscles and the balance or anything to kind of push against because the back of my wheelchair comes to about my waist level. So if you're paralyzed from high up, you kind of need something to counterforce the force of pushing with your arms and your shoulders. Yeah. So it didn't appeal. And that kind of then led me into thinking, hang on, how could I go on a cycle adventure again with friends? And that led me to eventually, about a year or two after my accident, having a special tandem bike made, which is I've still got. It's about 3 or 4 meters long. You pedal it with your legs on the back and your arms on the front. And I thought, well, that's perfect. I can just mug friends into coming cycling with me, and they won't get bored going faster or slower because they'll just be attached to me, and we'll do it together. So that was kind of my first machine. I called it my freedom machine because that then allowed me to share time outside with friends and start. The first big trip I went on was to the Outer Hebrides, and we put the wheelchair on the pannier rack, just plonked it on top of everything with the wheels on, kind of backwards, and strapped it on with bungees. And that was like a training trip to see if it might be possible to go and cycle across the Himalayas. So that was your begun.
So that's within a year of becoming paralyzed, you were already thinking, I'm going to cycle across the Himalayas. Like no middle ground at all? No sort of...
Oh no, the middle ground was the Outer Hebrides.
Oh right, sorry, okay.
And it wasn't I think the first year or two I got into wheelchair racing because that was a sport that was quite popular and still is. But I found it really uncomfortable because you kind of crouched in a very tight fitting seat, and really you're looking down at the tarmac and you're hunched over your knees. If anyone might have seen people get a bit confused between hand bikes and racing wheelchairs.
Yeah,
So
this
racing
was a question I
wheelchairs,
had for you actually. The difference, because I suppose, I mean, I think there's people know Tanya Gray Thompson, for example, and
yeah.
she is a wheelchair racer, isn't she?
Yeah, so a racing wheelchair has 3 wheels like a hand bike and 2 wheels at the back, one at the front, which is what how most hand bikes are configured. But there's no chain, there's no gears, and you're pushing a very sort of small push rim in the middle of the wheel and kind of punching it to generate power. And you're hunched over your knees and you're pretty much looking at the tarmac. And when you're paralyzed from high up, as I am, you don't have those core muscles to kind of sit up and look at where you're going. So you get a really sore neck from kind of constantly straining. So when I discovered hand cycling and being in that recumbent position, I call it a bit like a mobile sunbed, but it was just kind of transformational because suddenly you could go out and really enjoy being outside and look up and see the mountains and the sky. And yeah, for me, it was just a far more pleasurable activity. And having gears obviously meant that hills, you weren't getting worried. In a racing wheelchair, you can't really just go into all terrain because there will be hills that are just too steep for the push rim and the gearing. So with a hand bike, I, to this day, touch wood, I haven't found a hill that's tarmacked that's too steep for me to get up. There is one in the northwest of Scotland that is too steep for me to keep the pedals going round and over the top. So I have to kind of pull, put the brake on, crank backwards, pull again, put the brake on, crank backwards. That's right up in sort of north of what's the place that's famous for the pies up in the northwest Scotland?
I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can help us out in the comments. Someone who knows the pies of the northwest of Scotland can.
Famous pie shop. Anyway, it's in a loop, kind of in Assynt, just north of that
Right.
village that's famous for pies.
So Outer Hebrides, obviously, that sounds like it was kind of, you were just basically making it up as you went along, and then that showed you it was possible. What were the biggest challenges, I guess, when you were kind of figuring it all out as far as cycle touring on a hand cycle?
Obviously, space to carry equipment is quite a big one. So if I want to go cycle touring on my own on an actual hand bike, you've got to figure out a way to take your wheelchair because hand bike isn't handy for getting into places. So I've spent quite a lot of time. The very first time I went cycle touring on my own was about 4 years after my accident, and I decided to get a train to France and base myself in Avignon to start with and just kind of see if I could figure out doing a bit of touring on my own. So I had a special kind of tow bar made for my hand bike that I could manage to reach around and clip my wheelchair onto, and it all seemed great, but I'd not actually properly tested it in practice. So I remember getting off the train in Avignon with very limited French, and the guy that worked at the station helping me get my wheelchair on the back of the bike, and then I had my camping kit in the wheelchair.
Okay.
Very limited stuff with me, and I set off cycling towards a campsite and crossed the bridge across the river in Avignon, and my wheelchair somehow came unhooked and was suddenly going past me in the fast lane.
Oh, no.
And crashed into the side and all the stuff fell over the floor and motorists were stopping to help me. So yeah, there's teething problems. I think, there's a lot. I think when you're in a wheelchair and you're trying to have adventures, there's always a lot of inventing needs to be done and being creative and finding creative solutions to things. Probably now there's more actually off the peg solutions around if you can research hard and find them. But yeah, so.
But there's a lot of people in the comments telling us that the pie shop is in Lochinver. So
correct, Lochinver. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everyone. So, I mean, that hill sounds hard enough. It sounds like a very steep hill, whether you're on a hand cycle or not. So, good job. Yeah. Pies are worth it, presumably.
I do remember for the first time I ever did that loop was quite early on in my days of being paralysed and quite new to hand cycling. And it's hard to describe exactly where the loop goes, but you don't actually go into Lochinver, but I started on Loch Assynt near the castle there, and then kind of did a big loop round to the north and back over. I think you come down across the edge of, oh God, it's such a long time. Is it Ben A that's up there? Anyway, my friends had all gone hiking up one of the mountains, and I was just out cycling this loop on my own. And about 9 o'clock at night, when I still wasn't back, they came looking for me, and it just took me so long because then I wasn't as fit then. and it was a huge journey. And all I'd taken to eat was like one of those mini packets of Pringles. I was completely not on the radar of how to look after yourself and be an athlete. So
Oh,
I ended up being rescued and brought home at the very end of the day. And I went back about 5 years ago and did the same loop, and it was all done and dusted in 4 hours. And it seemed
wow.
incredibly easy compared to the first time I did it. So, yeah.
I mean, we'll come back to. I do really want to talk about your your adventures and your sort of advice that you would give. But let's sort of, if we're thinking about chronologically your journey to where you've got to just now. So you went cycle touring with your chair in France, and that sounds like it was another steep learning curve. Was that before the Himalayas? Was that another kind of?
That was after, I think. Yeah. So my first endeavors into cycling were all on the tandem that I had made.
Right.
First hand cycle tandem that had ever been made, possibly still is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've really seen one where both people are in active positions, pedaling. And basically just trained on that with friends, and eventually toured in the Hebrides. And that was kind of the build up to, that was it really, to head off to the Himalayas. And we flew to Almaty in Kazakhstan, and then to Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, and began cycling in Bishkek. We went by land from Almaty to Bishkek, and then began in Bishkek, cycled through Kyrgyzstan and up into the Tian Shan Mountains, crossed the border from Kyrgyzstan into China, which was hugely challenging back in, I think it was 1996, so 3 years after my accident. And back then, that border it was only the first year that the border between what had been the Russian countries and China had been open. So you had to have special permission from a Chinese travel organization to enter the country, and they had to meet you at the border at a specific time on a specific date. So we ended up, of course, getting there early because we were so anxious about missing our crossing date.
Yeah, how do you know how long that's going to take you if you've never done it before?
Exactly, and it's all dirt roads and pretty rough terrain. So yeah, we got there early in the end, and then we all got very, very sick because it's the middle of nowhere with pretty basic hygiene, and yeah, it was a fairly rough place, but it was incredible journey. It was 6 weeks in total cycling, and then from China to Kashgar in China, and then we began cycling from Kashgar through the Taklamakan Desert, which was extremely hot and stony, and then up into the Karakoram and Tian Shan Mountains, and finally descended down into Gilgit in Pakistan. So yeah, I mean, it was incredible adventure, and probably one of the few windows where that part of the world, the Hunza Valley, you're kind of cycling beneath K2 and some of these incredibly, they're just these amazing Himalayan peaks. It was a dream come true for me, having gone from lying in a hospital bed, paralyzed, wondering what your life would ever be. I'd broken my neck. When I broke my back, I also broke my neck, and that meant I'd had metal bolts drilled into my skull here. And a halo and weights hanging off it. So I'd spent a lot of time lying in a bed just looking at polystyrene ceiling tiles and really kind of thinking my life of adventure was over. So that journey was super transformational for me, because it was just very special to do something independently, no support vehicle, just with a few friends, going on a really intrepid journey and managing and surviving, and just
I mean, shout out to your friends. Your friends sound amazing. From being up for joining you on this tandem, which didn't exist until you asked for it to be built, and then coming up and rescuing you from halfway up a hill, because they were, I mean, that's pretty amazing, and obviously has made a big difference to your ability to do everything else that you've done.
Yeah, sorry, what do you mean rescuing me halfway up a hill? I missed that.
No, I don't mean rescuing you, sorry, when they were concerned that you hadn't come home after 9 hours that time.
Yeah, that was years later, but and a different set of friends. But I have been really fortunate, I think, when I was paralyzed, because I was kind of immersed in a world of outdoor adventure, I was really fortunate to be surrounded by some really special friends who were really up for just trying new things. And without that support, it would have been so much harder to have got into the life that I've had. And I've been very fortunate throughout my life to, none of the things I've done could I've ever done on my own. People maybe look at what I've done and think I'm fiercely independent and I just go and do all these things myself. And I am fiercely independent, but I can't do all of these things myself. And it's only thanks to some incredible friends that anything's been possible.
It's amazing. It's interesting. A lot of the webinars that we've done for the Women's Festival of Cycling, you know, this sort of thread that unites them all is this sort of the feeling of community and the importance of having people around you that are supportive of what you do. And we talked to Emily Chappell the other day, and she was talking about obviously her invisible peloton that she kind of draws strength from when she feels in a low place. And obviously, you know, whether the friends are invisible or whether they're there, obviously it makes a big difference, doesn't it, to kind of keep you going. But yeah, I wondered. So you started off obviously with these kind of adventure cycles, and you've done so many different adventures. But parallel to that, or alongside that, at some point you've obviously also decided it's not good enough. I need to do some racing as well. How did you get into athletics and the racing side of things?
Yeah, so that didn't happen until about 15 years after I'd been paralyzed, and I had no interest in racing or Paralympic sport at all. But I suppose, so yeah, I was doing all these different adventures and they were all different kinds. So sea kayaked from Vancouver to Alaska over 3 months, and sit skied across the Greenland ice cap, and went back to climbing and climbed El Capitan, and in between kept fit by just cycling for fun.
Okay.
And then I suppose somebody said to me, I wonder how good you could be at something if you actually just focused and did one thing and tried to see how good you could get at it. And I've never been that kind of person. Like, I've always been one that likes variety and different things and different experiences. But at that point in my life, I did think, you know, I wonder if you just applied yourself, maybe it's time just to stop doing a bit of everything and being kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, and just see what might happen. It might be quite an interesting journey. And I suppose for me, it's all, the whole of life is just about learning. Like, I love just to start a journey and discover what you learn, whether that's adventure or whether that was seeing if I could get to a Paralympic Games. So at the time, I think it was 2008, and it coincided that someone had made this comment to me, but also the Beijing Paralympics was on television. It was the first time that hand cycling had ever been a Paralympic sport. And when you like exercise and you're in a wheelchair, it's amazing how many people have said to me over the years, oh, have you ever thought about going to the Paralympics? As if it's just like entering your village fun run and something that you just do. So I suppose when I saw hand cycling, it's the first time that I saw a sport where I thought, I'd love to do that. You know, I'm passionate about cycling. I had no interest in running around an athletics track or swimming up and down a swimming pool. It's just doesn't float my boat enough. But when I saw the cycling, I thought, maybe it's time just to get my head down. And the next Paralympic Games was in London, so I just thought, hey, why not just give it a go and see if
not to?
Yeah, and I called it my Olympic experiment. It was just like this big kind of, I don't mean a joke, but it was just totally like, let's just see. And in a way, I probably started it out with zero appreciation of how difficult it was actually going to be. I thought because I was really fit and I thought I was really fit and I rode my bike every day, I thought that would be enough. And then I very quickly realized after entering a couple of races and coming last in them, like really badly last, as in there was no finish line anymore. I think the next race I did, after training really hard for a year and thinking I was in quite good form, I entered the National Hand Cycling Championships. There was only 2 women in it. Rachel Morris had raced in Beijing and won a gold medal there, but she lapped me like twice or something on this quite short circuit. And you come away thinking, okay, it's not quite what I thought. It's a bit harder. But I still don't believe I've had to work really, really hard to get there. I've really committed and trained hard and got a coach and began learning about how to train properly and that less is more, and how to train smarter and just push yourself. And I had no idea what a heart rate monitor was or how to measure anything, like a power meter. What's that? It was just this huge journey of discovery over a period of 3 years, really, from when I got a coach in 2009 to the Paralympic Games in 2012.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting. I think that says a lot about you and your personality, probably, that you didn't, having been lapped twice in that race, you didn't go, do you know what, this isn't for me. You dug in harder and decided, I'm going to take it to the next level and make sure that I can do everything I need to do to actually make this happen. And you didn't just compete in London. I believe you won a medal. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah. So I think I have to thank my coach a lot because he's an engineer. He's got a really kind of detail mind, and I don't. I'm a bit sort of like big picture vision, in kind of like that feeling of what you want, but not so good at maybe writing the spreadsheets all the time.
Yeah.
So he's been fundamental over my kind of 10-year journey or more now with Paralympics, of just reminded me how to just stick to a process and just keep going. I think it is, to do well at something, whatever it might be, whether it's in our job or a specific skill, there's that thing, isn't there, of something like 10,000 hours. It is just about repeating and keeping going, and you have your good days, your bad days, up and down, and you just never know. So that was all part of the journey, along with his kind of wisdom and detailed analysis and passion to try and help me get stronger as well. So yeah, never really thought it was just about getting to London. And then finally I did get there, and in that 4 months before the Paralympic Games, I made a huge jump in fitness. We tried some new things, really started to push things to the next level. And I did a lot of work on a treadmill, on a giant sort of treadmill that the hand bike would fit on. And the training sessions might only have been in like an hour long, or maximum an hour and a quarter. But in that hour, I'd be absolutely on the floor by the end of that hour. And in those 3 or 4 months, I hadn't realized how much I'd come on. So when it actually came to getting to London, it was a shock to me to realize that I was as strong as I was. And I'll never forget, well, the shock, first of all, of winning the silver medal. But then in the road race 2 days later, myself and my teammate Rachel found ourselves racing each other for the bronze medal. And I think we were both so shocked, because in that race, she's in a different category to me, and all the women's categories of disability were together in that handbike race. And usually, because I've got a high injury, I would have much less chance of medaling in the road race. But suddenly I was like, oh my goodness, how did this happen? We're racing each other for the bronze medal. So then we had this, I don't know how it happened, but we had this idea to try and share it and cross the finish line holding hands and share the bronze medal. But apparently that's not what you're supposed to do at Olympic Games. And people went a bit ballistic. Some people were crying, going, oh, that was the most amazing thing, and that's the spirit of the Olympics. And if I'm honest, most of the men in my life were livid and going, you should have raised that medal with yours. And
because Rachel won the bronze, didn't she? Rachel won the bronze.
Our digital times were identical, and the organisers didn't really know what to do for a while. And we were like, but you could just give us both a medal. But I don't actually think they have 2 medals, so they weren't having that. So they looked at a photo and decided that Rachel's wheel was maybe like a couple of millimeters ahead of mine, and gave her the medal, and then invited me onto the podium to share in it. And then the team psychologist followed me around for the whole day or two afterwards. I think he thought I was going to crack. But actually, for me, that decision, although it was impulsive and not planned at all, I realized it was very much based on my values and what's important to me. And Rachel had inspired me with her riding in Beijing. She'd had a really tough year and not gone well. She didn't medal in her time trial. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that I gave it to her at all, but we just thought, to me, it just felt like the right thing. We've been on this journey together to share that spirit. So it's never bothered me that that's what happened. It was just a really special moment on all levels.
I think I certainly have an impression of people like you who compete at that level, that you must be kind of ruthless and like it's all about medaling or bust, and obviously that's just not true from what you've just said. And from
no, and I don't know if I'm a bit of a, you kind of obviously go out and you give it your best fight, but also I'm a bit of a softie. So there's girls that have come in, women that have come into the sport who, after me, or there's a woman from Poland who had a climbing accident, and she wrote to me and she'd read my book and she got into hand cycling, and she was always like not as strong, and then she got stronger and stronger. And one year she won the world championships, road race, and I think I was third, and I was crying because I was so happy for her. It's like really moving. And I think in Paralympic sport, it's maybe a bit different, because people have had quite, you kind of know what kind of journey people have been on, and also the support that you've had to get there. And when I've trained my ass off and go somewhere and people are still faster than me, it's inspiring. You're like, wow, they've really worked hard, and it's a moving place. And I think there's a lot of respect and camaraderie between people. And for me, what I enjoy about my sport is not, who cares who rides a weird hand cycle the fastest in the world? It's totally irrelevant and ridiculous. It doesn't make you a better person. For me, it's just that hand cycling is my joy and my freedom, and it brings so much to my life, socially, mentally, physically, that for me, it's just a passion. And if I get to be good enough to race and represent my country and have a chance at being in that environment of a Paralympic Games, and it's a privilege. And it's not for me about, of course, it kind of on one level sort of is about winning medals, because if you put in all the hard work, it's great if you do, but at the same time, it's not. But it's easy for me to say that because I've won a medal at both Paralympic Games. If I'd worked my backside off for years and never done it, it might feel differently.
Yes, presumably. But well, I mean, I think it's really refreshing to hear that it's not only the ruthless pursuit of medals, that there's more to it. Can you?
Well, I mean, what's interesting for me now is that after winning gold in Rio, a lot of people just were like assumed I would retire. They're like, well, you've done everything you can do in your sport now. But it's like, yeah, but I actually like training. I like riding my bike, and I like having that focus, that the purpose that it gives you, that's a goal in the distant horizon.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't given up, and I've had a really tough couple of years after Rio. I was quite ill and had a few operations, and my health was really not great. And now it's much better again, and I'm back riding, and really, well, I never really stopped riding, but not at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
And I really would love to go to Tokyo and make that my last games, and actually just to be there and be part of it. If I could win a medal, that would be fantastic, and that is my aim. But I don't know whether I can make it. I got dropped off the team last October after not making the podium at the World Championships. I was.
How did that feel?
Well, it was okay. It was just felt like, well, it's part of the journey. It feels like on one hand, you're kind of ready for the rubbish heap, like someone's saying, we don't think you're good enough. And on the other hand, I was like, it was just one race. It was one day, one moment. I wasn't that far off. And I was actually, for the first time in 26 years of being paralyzed, I was actually vomiting 2 days before it and in bed shivering and not very well. So I'm not making excuses. I don't know. But I'm like, hey, just try.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think sometimes it's better to say we've tried our best and it didn't work out than to have given up because of fear of failure or fear of something that actually isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the plan is still Tokyo 2021 then?
Yeah, it's obviously been delayed a year, so that was a bit of a surprise. So I've kind of.
How did you feel sorry to interrupt you, having been dropped from the team, how did you feel then hearing that the Olympics and the Paralympics were postponed? Did you think, haha, I can, it gives me another chance?
Well, actually, had been entered the team, even though I'd been dropped, they had entered me into the Tokyo Paralympics 2020. So I did have an entry. It wasn't guaranteed because that was a long list, but it was looking positive. And also in February, I was strong. I had some powers that were better than I've seen since 2012. So I was actually feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah.
But then I had to have bladder surgery in late February, March, and then COVID happened. So obviously things have declined a little bit since then. But no, I think the fact that I had to have the bladder surgery would have not been ideal for being on the best form for Tokyo. So I'm very good at reframing things when they go wrong and seeing the positive in it. So I'm like, okay, now I've got. At first, it was like, oh gosh, can I motivate myself for another year of hard sessions? And then I was like, okay, come on, it's 1 year. It's actually nothing, and it gives you a bit more time. So we'll see. I'm trying and see how it goes.
That's great. And you've been training under lockdown? I know you were in Mallorca, so obviously the lockdown there was even more extreme than we've experienced here. But so have you been training the whole time?
Yeah, I suppose it's become like a way of life. So I have a training plan and I try and follow it as best as I can. So when in lockdown, obviously it was very, very strict in Spain. We weren't allowed to go outside at all for exercise. But I was fortunate in that I had a roller for my bike. And it's a roller that's got resistance on it, so I can do some decent work on it. And I have a car park, so a private kind of car park by the apartment. So I could go outside, and every day I just changed the direction that my bike was pointing in, so that I pretended I was in a different place, like a different view, and just shove the headphones on. And if it was just a steady session, I'd watch something on Netflix or listen to podcasts. And if it was a hard session, it's put the pumpy music on. So yeah, and then gradually it got hotter and hotter because obviously lockdown went on a bit longer than maybe we thought. So eventually I got an extension cable and a fan, and that was all rigged up in the car park.
Brilliant.
And it's actually gone okay. Finally got back in the gym. So in Mallorca, I've been back in the gym a good couple of months already, and I've come back to Scotland now, and there's still no gyms open. So I'm definitely going backwards at the moment, but anyway.
So you're back on the rollers? Or
well, bit of mixture of rollers, trying to ride out when it's not raining, and trying not to worry about losing strength because there's no gym open. But yeah,
I don't even know what the time scale is for gyms reopening in Scotland. I don't have any ideas.
there's no date set yet, but there's rumours of possibly, maybe the first after a week into August or something.
Okay. So can we talk about, so Julie has written in the comments that she loves your philosophy, and I mean, as do I, but I think I know that the sort of psychology, of kind of motivation, and I know that's something you're really interested in, and you've got a degree in as well. So I mean, I wonder if you could talk a bit about your kind of mindset and how do you stay motivated. I mean, full stop, but kind of, especially when you're faced with challenges and things that you've got no control over, like COVID.
Yeah. So I suppose over the years I've got more and more interested in mind and psychology and what's going on with it. And I suppose that's been very experiential through my own journey with sport. And I also realized that there are clearly sports psychologists that I've occasionally worked with. And the first one I worked with through the Scottish Institute of Sport, it really helped. She really helped me. And that was in preparation for the London Paralympic Games. But a lot of the sports psychologists I've come across or occasionally worked with, whilst it's been helpful to a degree, it's often very much, perhaps it's the UK sports system very much put in your hands to kind of ask for what you need. And I just think you don't know what you don't know. Like you just need someone to say, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what might be blocking you, etc. So I've become really interested and ended up studying myself. So I did an OU degree in some psychology, and then I did a master's in high performance sports psychology and coaching. And I'm a hypnotherapist. I've since got on and studied. Recently, I've come across a fantastic new technique that I'm training in, and it's just really quite transformational, called brain spotting, which is using the visual field to connect with sort of trauma that might be locked in our brains and unblocking kind of things that. So I've noticed for the past couple of years, since I had major surgery after Rio, that whenever I do hard work on my bike, my right eye closes. And I've been trying to figure out why on earth that is. It's like, why would I do that? Anyway, I've managed to solve it through using this brain spotting process. So
Amazing.
I'm fascinated by, that process of motivation and blocks and thought processes and how we can help ourselves through that. And that's something I'm doing more and more work with individuals, and soon to run a program called Train Your Brain in September in conjunction with the Adventure Syndicate. So if anyone's interested, please message me. We can do details about how to contact me at the end, but it'd be great to get people involved with that. And I have run one sort of sports psych training camp in Mallorca, but looking to do some more of that because it's such a fantastic environment to not just ride and train, but then kind of work some of that psychology and improvement from the mind side in with it. I think it's interesting that so many people focus so much on the physical bit, and actually just reframing things in your mind and changing just one little thing in your brain can give you enormous leaps in motivation, performance, perspective, which is so easy to delete and miss out when you're just focused on trying to the physical part.
Great. Yeah, we'll definitely, once we have a link where people can go and sign up to that, then we can stick that on our social media, and obviously, yeah, as you say, people can get in touch with you as well, because that sounds great, and I can see there's people in the comments saying that they would be interested in it. So yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Oh, hi, Nessa. I know you. Nice to see you. I was listening to Facebook about.
So what kind of advice would you give? Because I think just thinking specifically about possibly, I don't know, somebody who's just had a spinal injury or something which has stopped them from living life the way that we're living life, and then the idea, not everybody I don't think would be lying in the hospital bed in the spinal injuries unit thinking, yep, what am I, how am I going to get back on a bike, or how am I going to get beyond archery? I'm sure there's nothing wrong with archery. If that's what you want to do, then great. But what advice would you give somebody in that sort of situation about thinking about what your options are, even if they're finding out about what your options are and overcoming those first hurdles, I suppose.
So the good news is that 20-something years later, after me being paralysed, there's a lot more going on in terms of hand cycling and access to hand bikes and opportunities. So there's a lot more out there. There are lots of organisations around the country. So there's the Hand Cycling Association UK. There are various disability cycling groups. I know Cycling UK, you've increasingly got more articles and connections to things that are happening. There are often in different areas, there's one in Inverness, there are kind of closed cycle tracks where there might be disability bikes available or adapted bikes available. So there's lots of options out there. And I think, it's easier to find that information and to research. There's still a huge barrier in the cost of equipment, like a hand bike. Pretty much the minimum you're going to get one for is like $3,000. And my racing bikes, they're just outrageously expensive, like you're talking like best part of 10 grand. It's just depressing. I would love to get into some off-road biking, and I got the chance to try an amazing bike just last weekend. It's a hand-pedaled mountain bike with battery assist, which just opens up a whole new world of possibility. But I don't have $7,000 for a new bike, so it's a big barrier for a lot of people.
It's also about where do you store something like that as well? How do you get it in and out of your house?
It reaches a point where you feel like you need a whole truck to store everything in, or and also that bike is quite heavy. Like I tried to pick it up and couldn't even get it in my car. So there's barriers, but I think at the same time there's possibilities and there's lots of options out there. And I think my advice would be that if you think it interests you, then find a way to have a go. And one of the ways that would make that journey easier and more fun would also be to find a friend that's up for going along with you, having a go with you, being your buddy perhaps. Just helping you begin that journey. So yeah, and I would say that it's worth trying. For me, it's changes can change your life. And I know that there's other barriers, like people sometimes contact me saying how difficult it is. How do you get in and out of a hand bike? How do you get your feet into the footrests? And I think it is all difficult at the beginning. Like when I was first paralyzed, I couldn't even work out how to pull my trousers up because you sat on your bum all the time. And I remember asking these two women who'd been paralyzed for quite a long time, how do you sit in your wheelchair and get dressed? If you want to go swimming and then get dressed without lying on a bed, how do you do it? And I think it's like anything, you just have to be a bit stubborn and try, ask people and find ways. But there's always ways.
So in Edinburgh, we've got a hand cycling project with Ken is our development officer, my colleague, and you know him as well. And so I've kind of seen Ken kind of helping people who've just turned up, and so it's somewhere you can go. Certainly, if anyone's in Edinburgh and fancied using a hand cycle, then let us know. We can help you out. And I think it sounds from Ken and from what you're saying as well that there's a really close knit community, and everybody's quite happy to answer questions, even if they seem daft, I suppose. Like, how do you put your trousers on? How do you transfer, that kind of thing? There's everyone has to do it once for the first time, don't they?
Facebook group like Hand Cycling UK, there's various Facebook groups if you had to search around, and often you could just pose questions and I'm sure people would get responses and help.
And so obviously the sort of the systems are there are groups and there's people and there's things you can, but what if you, from a psychological perspective, what would your advice be to kind of overcome those barriers of I can't do that, even if all the resources are there? Because there will people who kind of have that mental block as well.
Well, like anything, I suppose you've got to have that some kind of desire to want to do it. And there's always that initial inertia that we've got to overcome, and that initial activation energy we've got to find to make something happen. So but for me, the benefits that I gain from cycling, just psychological, physical, being outdoors in nature, sharing time with friends, is life transforming. So I guess I would, and in the beginning, it really did feel hard. Like I remember my very first go on a hand bike, which was the kind you clip onto your wheelchair, and it wasn't easy. So, but I've since met people who use that kind of bike and pedal a long way on it, like 100 kilometers on that kind of bike. So I think it's about remembering there's lots of different types of hand bike out there. There's recumbent, fast racing style. There's clip onto your wheelchair style. There's battery assist style. There's recumbent ones that are a bit more sit up and you can see around better. There's all sorts out there. So I would say just try and have a go on as many different types as you can by connecting with different projects that exist around the country, and find out maybe just investigate what's right for you before you commit to getting something. And then when you do commit to getting something, if finances are a challenge, then I know people who've crowdfunded for their bikes or had help fundraising or written to charities that might help. There are ways and means to get over that barrier as well.
There are grants as well. Energy Saving Trust have just launched grants specifically for adaptive bikes. So again, that's something we can put a link up to if people are interested in getting a bit of help with funding, because as you say, that is that in itself is a very difficult barrier to overcome.
It is, yeah. Who's just launched that? Sorry.
Energy Savings Trust, EST.
Oh, okay.
So they do a variety of different loans, but this year they've just started an adaptive bike specific one. So and that's for both.
And is that a loan or a grant or?
It is I can't remember off the top of my head. But I think all the information is on Energy Savings Trust's website. So hopefully we can get a link up to that before the end of the chat.
Yeah. I'm also conscious that we're, obviously because hand cycling is my kind of experience, but there's loads of different kinds of disabilities. And sometimes people contact me because I know people from the paracycling team who are amputees or single arm, pedaling with one arm, no legs. I don't know. There's all sorts of combinations, visual impairments. So, there's adaptations and things out there for all levels and all kinds of disabilities. It's very much open to all, I think.
So going back to why it's so brilliant to ride a bike, let's chat about your adventures and some of the places that you've been. So I wonder, do you want to talk a little bit about Quest 79 to kick things off?
Yeah, so I suppose after 8 years of Paralympic cycling with less adventures, so that was London and then Rio, I decided after Rio that I couldn't possibly do another round if I didn't get some adventure back in there. And then I don't know how it happened. It just sort of emerged the winter after Rio when I was kind of recovering from surgery and just wondering what next. And I realized that I'd won the 79th medal for Britain in Rio. And 79 had been there's a long story about it. It started to become this kind of haunting number. I was like, there's something in this number with me. I don't know what it is. I also realized it's the atomic number of gold, and I used to be a geologist studying gold in South America. So there was all this kind of like woo number 79. And climbers obviously climb the seven summits on the 7 continents, and I just somehow had this idea to cycle 7 continents and 9 rides, so 1 across each continent and 2 Paralympic Games. And the idea was that the 7 continents would be between Rio and Tokyo Paralympics. So I began that journey. And so the first big ride was just not that many months after Rio. It was December 2016. And that was down the length of Patagonia, following a route called the Carretera Austral, which is basically just a dirt road that runs the length of Chile's Patagonia. It's a stunning, stunning wilderness. I did it with some teammates. So one, Jacko, has a carved arm. He lost an arm in Afghanistan, in working in the military in Afghanistan. My friend Steve, who's got retinosa pigmentosa, so basically he's lost all his peripheral vision and potentially might lose all of his eyesight eventually. So, and Steve's partner, wife Caroline. So the 4 of us just went on this kind of intrepid wilderness adventure, camping in the wilds. The 2 guys had trailers on the back of their bikes, so Yak Bob trailers, one with my wheelchair on it, the other just loaded with camping kit and all the stuff to survive in the wilderness, because it's kind of like minimum 5 days ride between kind of villages where you might be able to stock up again, and we were just camping really rough, kind of in gravel pits at the side of the road, and so that was pretty big adventure on the bikes.
And that's straight off the back. So you just went from Rio down to Patagonia. You didn't bother coming home in the meantime?
We were back home.
Okay.
We went at the end of start of December, I think, end of November, start of December. Right. So a couple of months after Rio. But we planned it before Rio. It was kind of like our post-Olympic depression thing to look forward to, just in case we all got down after Rio. So the next ride after that I planned was the length of North America, so from Canada to Mexico down the Pacific coast. I'd always wanted to ride the Pacific Coast. When I was 10, we lived in Oregon for a year. My mum and dad were
Oh,
teachers
cool.
and swapped jobs, and we spent a year there. I went to school there. So that was quite a journey and really interesting because I did it with two guys I didn't really know at all.
Oh,
One was trying to lose 45 kilos, and the other, it turned out, had a serious alcohol problem. Yeah, he was big time alcoholic.
oh no.
And I was dependent on both of them because for various reasons, like emotionally, practically, it was really a special journey, but pretty tough.
That sounds intense.
Well, it was intense and it was long days. It was, like pretty much 80 to 100K a day,
Wow.
pretty hilly terrain. Following a coast is never flat. So yeah, it was an amazing journey. Um, After that, I think it was Australia that was next. So I was competing in the Commonwealth Games for Scotland in triathlon, and I was very, very fortunate to win an award with BBC Radio 4 and the Royal Geographical Society to follow the length of Australia's Murray River from its
Okay.
source in the Snowy Mountains to the sea in Adelaide. And I just became fascinated by the story of the river because it basically runs through a desert and they grow all the crops of Australia and vineyards of Australia are all on this river where there
Wow.
basically is no water, and they divert water down the river from other rivers. It's just crazy, the story of the river. And I got really interested in how we can, if I could learn from the river about how to do something more sustainably, because I felt like I'd
Mm.
really not been training and looking after myself in a sustainable way in my kind of head down, burn myself out for Rio. So that was I could waffle on for ages. I'll try and be succinct. So that was the Australian. And there's still a program actually on BBC Radio 4 website called From Source to Sea Via Me, which is about that journey.
Oh,
It's a half-hour program.
brilliant.
And then followed the River Ganges from its source in the Himalayas down to Varanasi. It's kind of sacred spiritual center where all the bodies are burned on the ghats and things. Incredible. I don't know. Just been an incredible 4 years basically. And then
How
after
did
that,
you?
there was Ethiopia. So the water towers of Africa is what the Simien Mountains of Ethiopia are called. And I just became
Okay.
fascinated by these incredibly beautiful, big mountains in this country that fascinated me. So that was the African ride. And then in the autumn just gone, I rode across Europe, following the Camino de Santiago from northern France to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. So the only continent left is Antarctica, which is in the planning and extremely intimidating and scary, and trying to figure out how to. Yeah, it's happening. We're going to go January 2020, and I've discovered that
No.
79 degrees latitude and longitude is in Antarctica. So we're going to go and
Oh yes.
try and cycle. I'm working on a project with some Israeli guys to build a special ice bike, hand bike.
Wow.
Anyway,
So
lots of exciting things happening.
January 2021,
Sorry,
22.
22.
Okay.
So originally, I thought that might be before Tokyo, but it's so big logistically, financially,
Mm.
safety-wise that it needs the time and the training and the effort to make sure it's all proper, safe, and done well. So that's going to be the ultimate thing, and hopefully, I might manage Tokyo in between. So
Yeah.
that's the aim.
I mean, I take my hat off to you. So there's so much, and then in between, in your spare time, you've done all these other sort of degrees. You've written 3 books. You've got a PhD. How how do you relax? What do you do?
I do actually relax quite a lot. I don't have a telly, so that doesn't happen. But I do watch Netflix quite a lot on my sofa. When I'm in
Mhm.
New Yorker, I'm quite good at relaxing. I'm quite good at training and relaxing, recovering, because that is an important part of being strong as well. But yeah, with friends, social time, that's relaxing for me. And
Mhm.
I sleep. I'm good at sleeping. I like to have at least 8 hours a night, if not more.
Yep.
And
Rest
yeah,
is important, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Rest is very important to
Rest.
make
And,
sure
I,
you
and
can do.
my other passion is health and healing and kind of, I don't know what to describe it, but all kinds of invisible energy healing stuff, which I increasingly am working on with myself and other people. So yeah,
Brilliant.
that's my next passion after cycling, and definitely the realms that I'll be working more in. Just kind of this psychology, mindset, mindfulness, energy side of things that yeah, it's been a big part of my journey, but something that's maybe a bit less explicit in my life than the other stuff.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time. Does anybody have questions for Karen specifically that we can ask in the last sort of 10 minutes? I mean, I can keep asking you questions as well. If anyone wants to jump in, then I will pop those questions up. Actually, in the meantime, Janet has said that she has started the process of getting a loan from the Energy Savings Trust, the loan I was talking about before.
Hello, Janet. I know you too. It's qualified to be VAT free.
So that's good to know. I wanted to ask if does anything scare you? We've been talking again, a sort of thread through all of these Women's Festival of Cycling talks is kind of, I suppose, and everything you've done as well, facing your fear and kind of using that, I suppose, as a way to motivate yourself. But we all get scared by different things, I suppose. But is there anything kind of, you've done so much that seems like, very frightening to me. But
I get scared, of course. I'm human, so especially some of the more intrepid adventures I've done, like crossing Greenland, where the actual danger factors are much higher. Going to Antarctica scares me. It's cold, and I don't manage very well in the cold, and less so these days. So what I do when I'm scared of stuff is write down what I'm scared of and try and break it down into the detail, and then try and figure out little things that I can do about each of those little factors that might make me just feel a little bit less scared. So, for example, when we went to Greenland, I was really scared about being eaten by a polar bear, about all my kind of toileting stuff. Like I have catheters, and it takes me an hour to have a poo, and I have how am I not going to get a frostbitten bottom? Just like the level of detail of my fear is huge, and it is for everybody. Like there's lots of personal reasons why we're scared about stuff. And for me, some of my biggest fears are more in my emotional world. So I get really scared of being sometimes really honest with someone, like telling someone how I really feel or worrying about hurting somebody. So, sometimes I've always felt like I'm physically really brave, but emotionally less brave. So that's something I've been working on.
Okay.
But yeah, there's fears like anybody. And I think we've just got to, I suppose my process with fear is to notice it, honor it, acknowledge it, write it down, break it down, see what I can do about it, see if there's practical stuff I can do. And in the emotional world, it's maybe the same process, and then deciding, okay, am I ready to confront that? Am I ready to find a way around that? I don't know. So yeah, just trying, like all of us, getting out of our comfort zone. But it's all, I do believe that when we step into our fear, it's always a way to learn things and discover things and perhaps become better versions of ourselves as people.
So you think, so that's important then, getting out of our comfort zone, whatever that means. Everyone's comfort zone is obviously different. We've all got different sort of first steps that we need to take along the way. But yeah, that's good advice, I think, kind of just taking it, breaking it down and trying to look at it not so that it's huge and insurmountable.
Not everybody wants to step out of their comfort zones, and that's okay too. I'm not judging anyone's life, like it's up to us. But for me, I really find that the more I do that, the more my world tends to expand and more becomes possible. And I like living a life where it feels like more is possible rather than it closing down with fear or limitations. So
yeah. And we do make mistakes as well, don't everybody does, and that's all part of it as well, isn't it? That's learning.
Of course.
So we've got Olga asking how you start your day, Karen. So tips for being productive comes back to motivation probably as well, doesn't it?
Good question, Olga. And that's actually really interesting, because how I've just noticed this week since I got back to Scotland, I'm starting my day in a very different way to how we do in Mallorca. So maybe it's easier when the sun is shining and it's dry outside. So yesterday morning, I got up early because I was like, right, I'm going to go and do my training. I had like a couple of hours ride to do. I thought I'm going to do all of that and I'll be back by 10 and then I'll get on with other things in the day. And I woke up, looked out the window, and it was raining. So I definitely find it harder when the weather's not as reliable to kind of structure my day. But I always start my morning by, when I wake up, I kind of check in with myself, if that makes any sense. It's almost like, how am I feeling? Where am I at? I often use an app called Insight Timer, and I might listen to something that might kind of motivate me a little bit or have a little meditation. So I do quite a bit of just making time to have space at the start of my day, whether that be a meditation or something that kind of gets me going. I often then even have a little bit of time where I think, how do I want today to be? How can I make today happen in a way that I might want? Like, how do I want to feel today? What do I want to achieve today? So that kind of sets the day up, if you know what I mean. It doesn't take much time, but that's what I do.
And do you write that down then, or do you just go through it in your head?
I just do it in my head. Yeah, quite often before I get out of bed, I'll just have a few minutes where I'm thinking that, or I might do it the night before. And I always finish my day thinking about what I'm really grateful for in the day. So I usually try and have 3 things, moments, people, whatever, something that was really fantastic that I'm appreciating, like a kind of gratitude thing, which I know is becoming more of a thing generally. But I have been doing that for quite a while now. And again, I just do it in my head. But I find it just kind of tops and tails a day really well to start it and end it with that kind of mental space.
I think if it's becoming a thing, then it's because it works and it makes a difference. And so that's really good advice. Thank you.
And in Mallorca, after that, I pretty much start my day getting on my bike and heading out. And quite often there's a warm-up ride. It's about half an hour to the local coffee shop, and I have a little coffee, which is new to me because I never used to drink coffee until last year.
Wow.
And I take a big orange or some fruit with me, and that's kind of my breakfast or my ride energy. I have a ride and then day goes on from there. But
so I mean, I've got one more question because we're going to run out of time otherwise. But I wanted to ask, where of all the places you've been and all the things you've done, what are you most proud of that you've achieved? Just one thing of all the things.
Really that hard question. I don't know something so different. I suppose like anybody, you probably look at life and think, what have you not done that you thought you might? Like, I guess I always thought I might have a family or be in a relationship. I don't know. So those are kind of the areas of life that I'm like, what might have compromised? But then at the same time, I'm like, God, I have an amazing life, and I'm really happy that I guess once upon a time I had a kind of real job, whatever that is, in an office. And I realized that I wasn't that happy sat at a desk every day. And it was really, really scary to leave that, to step out from a reliable salary and something I'd really trained for, like as a geologist, and just to step into this kind of world that was a bit scary and unknown because I didn't know what that would mean, but I just knew that I didn't feel alive enough in what I was doing. So maybe that's something I'm quite proud of, that I was brave enough to step into the unknown, which not knowing how you're going to earn an income or how it's going to go, and just trusting that if you follow your passion and really trust that following your heart with things can work out. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well done, and thank you for doing that, because otherwise we wouldn't be here chatting to you. Probably we might you would just be a geologist sitting behind a desk,
computer screens, and maybe coming home feeling sad every day.
Well, thank goodness that's not the case, and that here you are. Well, I'm going to wrap things up, I think. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a whole series
thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone that's been listening.
Yes, absolutely. There's lots more talks coming next week. There's a webinar with Isabel Clement, who runs Wheels for Wellbeing as part of the Women's Festival of Cycling. So she is also a hand cyclist. So she'll be talking further about adapted bikes. So if this has whet your appetite for that kind of conversation, then join in next week as well. But yeah, thank you very much, Karen. It's been really, really nice to speak to you. And thanks everyone else for joining us as well. And have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.